Turkish Airlines presents Business Africa.
Hello and welcome to Business Africa. I am Ronald Kato. This week, shipping vessels rerouted from the Red Sea avoid South Africa's ports as capacity problems render them uncompetitive. Fearing congestion and red tape, ships are instead bunkering in Namibia or Mauritius, denying South Africa much-needed revenue. The shutting of Burundi's border with Rwanda has put the brakes on bilateral commerce between the East African neighbors. We hear from exporters scrambling to find new markets. And after concerns by South Sudan and Uganda on grain quality, a campaign is underway by Uganda to get stakeholders across the value chain to promote food safety. Emphasis is being put on proper post-harvest and storage protocols. Stay with us for the details. Thank you for joining us. As container ships sail away from the Red Sea, a windfall was anticipated for South Africa. Instead, capacity challenges mean there's not enough space for ships to dock, let alone refuel. South African container ports rank among the most inefficient in the world, according to the World Bank, owing to infrastructure gaps. Port operator Transnet saw its losses top $300 million in 2023, with port and rail failures estimated to be costing the economy up to $19 billion a year. Here's a report on the capacity challenges facing the main port of Durban.
The port of Durban, the main container port on the South African coastline, is facing capacity challenges. Its escalating tensions in the Red Sea have compelled international shipping companies to take detours around Africa's southernmost tip.
The logistical cost is quite substantial. It's quite huge if you have to look at it in terms of cost. Besides, of course, there is an additional demand. The capacity has depleted. Very soon you'll see that there will be a lack of equipment. There will be no containers available to be supplied to the market. Already in the last 2 weeks, I think the freight rates have skyrocketed.
The number of ships calling at the port of Durban for refueling and supplies has resurged as a result of the detour. Rosario said the congestion has extended waiting periods for container ships to enter the port.
We can't even accommodate our own vessels that are given the CTOC status because, the waiting period, the congestion in Durban is humongous. It's quite colossal. The waiting period we're looking at about 20 days at this point in time.
South African ports are beset by congestion, red tape, and limited support infrastructure.
Marissa Lorenzo is an independent political and economic risk analyst focusing on Southern Africa. Thank you very much, Marissa, for your time. South African ports failing to absorb increased traffic diverted from the Red Sea. Just how big are the capacity problems there?
It's really a sign of the broader infrastructure problems that South Africa has been experiencing now for more than a decade, nearly 2 decades. So what we're seeing at the ports with the rising congestion, not being able to handle increased traffic, we're also seeing a slowdown in export lead times. This is really symbolic of the kind of infrastructure, the lack of maintenance on key infrastructure, which is for the entire transport network. So, for example, most of South Africa's cargo is delivered by road to the ports and not by rail, which, in addition to being more inefficient, also really takes a toll on our roads and bridges. We've, of course, also experiencing a power crisis, which again is from the lack of maintenance. And all of this is just coming down to the state not having prioritized, or the government rather, not having prioritized infrastructure maintenance, infrastructure upgrading, not anticipating the needs of the country's transport logistics network in the way that it should have.
And South Africa's economy has struggled to return to growth in recent years. Would you say an opportunity presented by the Red Sea crisis has been missed?
So yeah, the last year that South Africa did record high economic growth was, before the global financial crisis. And I think, to be fair to the government, South Africa's economy is very exposed to global conditions. And we've had various global crises that would have impacted South Africa's economy very, very deeply because we're not insulated or or separate from these events. Having said that, there have been some decisions by government that perhaps have not facilitated investment as much. So, for example, we saw under former President Jacob Zuma, 2009 to 2018, we saw that there was much appetite on the part of international investors to put money into renewables in the country, and that really was stalled. And that's a result of corruption. It's a result of the state not prioritizing certain needs, not addressing the energy crisis at that time.
Marisa, what is South Africa's government doing to remedy these infrastructure problems?
So the government has several plans in the pipeline. So the one is the National Infrastructure Plan through to 2050. And what it sort of lays out is the areas that it would like infrastructure investment to go towards. So, of course, we have energy, we have water, we have digital infrastructure, transport, things like that. We've also got the Integrated Resource Plan, which is looking at how South Africa is going to address the energy crisis, but also diversify the power mix away from coal. And what these plans really see is South Africa needing to harness some kind of private sector investment. There is also a plan for the privatization of some of the ports. But this is something that's not very easy to do in South Africa because we do have strong labor unions. And like I said, this is something that has come from decades of a lack of infrastructure maintenance, and it's not something that can be resolved overnight.
Marisa Lorenzo, nice to have you. Thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thanks very much for having me today.
Burundi recently closed its border with Rwanda. While the reasons are political, the decision has shut down trade between the two neighbors. In 2022, Rwanda's exports to Burundi were worth $3.8 million. And as Diana Iriza reports, Rwandan traders, transporters and manufacturers are scrambling to find new markets.
The abrupt closure of the Burundi-Rwanda border has led to many challenges, leaving truck drivers and cross-border traders stranded with their businesses encountering hardships. This closure has disrupted timely delivery of goods to Burundi from Rwanda, forcing drivers to take a longer route through Tanzania, increasing expenses and potentially causing shortages of goods.
As a truck driver, one big problem I have is moving goods that are perishable. I trade fish between these countries, and if I take longer routes, there are risks the fish might spoil on the way, causing me to make losses.
Despite the impact on some businesses, a roofing company in Rwanda exporting iron sheets to different countries in Africa reported minimal effects due to the weak Burundian currency, which has limited value in Rwanda.
The majority of countries from which we import goods benefit from transactions in Rwandan francs. Similarly, when selling our exports, we tend to avoid countries like Burundi, which pays in Burundian francs, as its currency has limited value. Therefore, the border closure hasn't significantly impacted us.
Rwanda's exports to Burundi increased from $3.4 million in 2021 to $3.8 million in 2022.
Now, some of Uganda's maize exports to Kenya and South Sudan were found to contain aflatoxins, prompting a temporary ban. The contamination stems from poor post-harvest and storage protocols. A campaign targeting multiple stakeholders across the food value chain is underway to increase grain quality and safety.
Tom Opio is CEO of Amagara Commodities, a company that deals in grain. Much of his stock is sourced from outfield farmers, making post-harvest handling a priority for him. Uganda's grain has suffered a setback in the recent past. Some shipments to Kenya and South Sudan were found to contain aflatoxins.
What I would advise the farmers is to be patient, not to move crops from the field when they are not dry, and number two, not to dry them on open ground, because we as buyers of their grain, we will not accept a crop which is badly handled.
the discovery of contaminated grains has cost Uganda more than $38 million annually in lost export revenue. To ensure quality, the country's Grain Council is preparing a code of conduct.
What does maybe the seed person have to do to be able to produce quality seed? What does the farmer then have to do to produce, at the end of the day, quality grain that is going to supply to all the other? So everybody in the value chain has a part to play. So all these are lined up in that code of conduct.
Food safety studies have shown that the consumption of foods such as maize and groundnuts concentrated in aflatoxin are highly carcinogenic. Nevertheless, experts are optimistic the all-hands-on-deck approach will help deal with the contamination, saving money and lives.
And that wraps up this episode of Business Africa. I am Ronald Kato. The news continues on air and online. Bye for now, and I'll see you on the next episode of Business Africa.
Business Africa was presented by Turkish Airlines.